In 1968, a young man joined a prestigious university as a freshman. He was excited to start his new life in a prestigious university. However, he soon realized that it was not what he had expected. He lived in a rundown dormitory with peeling paint and leaky faucets. The bathroom was shared by over 50 students, and the food in the dining hall was bland and repetitive. Despite the less than perfect living conditions, he was determined to make the most of his experience. He threw himself into his studies, joining various clubs and making new friends. But as the weeks went by, he began to feel a sense of unease. It was during the weekends that this feeling would become the most overwhelming. You see, on the weekends, all the students would leave the dormitories and go home. This meant that for 2 whole days, he would have the entire dormitory to himself. At first, it was exciting to have the place to himself, but soon it started to get creepy. The silence was deafening, and the empty hallways seemed to echo with the sounds of his own footsteps. He would spend the weekends playing video games, watching movies, and eating instant noodles, just trying to keep himself from going stir-crazy. But then something strange happened. One weekend, while he was watching TV, he heard a knock on the door. He paused the movie and went to investigate. When he opened the door, he saw a group of students from the year above standing there with beer bottles in their hands. "Hey, you," one of them said, motioning towards the TV with a grin. "Want to join us for a party?" The man hesitated. He wasn't really a party person, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to go, but after some coaxing, he agreed. That night, the man partied hard. He drank more alcohol than he ever had in his life and danced until his feet were sore. It was a lot of fun, and he didn't want it to end. But as the night wore on, he started to feel a little sick. Not just a little sick, actually. He started puking his guts out in the bathroom. He emptied every last bit of alcohol he had consumed and collapsed on the floor, feeling utterly wretched. When he looked up, he saw a pair of sneering faces staring down at him. "What? You don't look too good," one of them said, snickering. "Need a hand?" Before he could respond, they picked him up and carried him back to his room. As they were carrying him, they started messing around with his hair, yanking it and twisting it into weird shapes. "Let's give him a nice little mohawk," one of them suggested, and they started snipping off his hair with scissors. When they were done, he looked like an extra from a bad 80s movie. The worst part was that he couldn't do anything about it. He was completely drunk and in no state to stop them. All he could do was watch in horror as they ransacked his room, stole his stuff, and did all kinds of other terrible things. By the time they were done, his room was a mess, and he was left feeling humiliated and violated. As the saying goes, he was completely knackered. He crawled into bed and passed out. The next morning he woke up feeling awful. His head was pounding, and his stomach was in knots. He got up and stumbled to the bathroom, where he spent the entire morning dry heaving and brushing his teeth. When he finally emerged from the bathroom, he noticed that all the guys from the party were gone. He looked around the room and realized that they had stolen everything, including his clothes and his shoes. He was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few personal belongings. He tried calling his parents, but they didn't answer. So he decided to go to the dean's office to explain the situation. The dean was a kind old man who listened patiently to the man's story. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said when the man was done, "but I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. If your things are stolen, you'll have to take it up with the student affairs office. As for your hair, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to wait for it to grow back." And so the man was left with no choice but to deal with the consequences of his actions. He had to buy new clothes and toiletries, and he had to wear a beanie to cover up his mohawk until his hair grew back. The experience was humiliating and embarrassing, but it was also a valuable lesson. He learned that drinking too much alcohol could lead to bad decisions, and that it was important to be careful when partying. He also learned the hard way that it's not always a good idea to trust strangers. From that day on, he never drank too much again. He also became much more cautious and reserved when it came to new people. The memory of that awful party stuck with him for years, but eventually it faded into just a funny anecdote about his college days.